He painted, actually, he's given us 10 wonderful paintings to put in the museum. This was originally designed to be a temporary exhibit, but all the artists were very happy, and so we've acquired more great aviation art. And one of the things I love about displaying aviation art, it actually helps capture some of that essence of what it's like to be a pilot. And the lower one, this is a work done by Mike Hagel, brother to Chuck Hagel. Mike has a great style. It's almost Norman Rockwell-esque is what he goes after. And Mike does a great job. He not only finds the history, but he actually searches out people who have either direct recollection or maybe secondary recollection of events. And so he doesn't want to just paint aircraft in the combat. He wants people to understand everything that goes on behind the scenes on that. Tech City is an engineering exhibit that we've gotten from another museum. And this goes along matching within our mission of not only promoting SAC, military aviation in general, but also science, technology, engineering, and math. And it's a great exhibit for families. But the big thing is our education department can use this to help teach kids and introduce them into engineering. And one of those aspects, and I'm actually getting these questions from our education department now, is can we start doing more teaching of engineering related to aircraft? Because we have all these wonderful aircraft in our museum, and we can use these to teach the kids about aeronautical engineering. So that's another aspect that we're working on. Curtis LeMay and creation of SAC. This is an exhibit that was actually requested by our executive director. He wants us to start telling the SAC story, but he doesn't want it to be a temporary piece. He wants us to create these and keep them in the museum. And he's tasked me with coming up with a way to tell this story coherently so our visitors can come in and they can go through the museum and get this story. And then he's also asked to include the impact SAC had within the Cold War. And then moving the museum, this is one that actually has come from our visitors. One of the biggest questions we get is, how did this museum get here? How did these aircraft get here? We did a temporary exhibit almost 10 years ago where we told that story, but we want to create a more permanent piece. So all of our visitors, no matter when they come, they can get this story and it can go down through generations. And that's pretty much what we have coming up on the horizons. The moving museum is due this fall. Oral histories is another aspect that we have added. We've sporadically captured oral histories, and it's usually either based around a specific exhibit or event, and we just gather maybe a few audio recordings. What we've embarked on now is actually seeking out oral histories. On some of the tables, what you'll see are general questionnaires. If you're interested, if you feel you have a great story, and just talking with a lot of you already, I already know you guys have great stories, we want some basic information, and then we want to set up interviews. I've already been doing, I've done a half a dozen in the last 3 months. I've talked with a gentleman who flew our B-36, a gentleman who flew C-54s in the Berlin Airlift. There's just a lot of great stories out there. We want to capture these. I know Harlan and Charlie can testify that we did this back in, I think it was 2010. I was having videographers to their reunion and captured a lot of those. And how we're using those is a variety of ways. One is that we're obviously going to store these for the longevity. There are researchers out there who are looking for information, and the best information we can give them are stories from the pilots themselves. We're also going to utilize these to help tell the story of our aircraft. We have an Aircraft of the Month program. Our B-36 was the first one, and we just happened to capture a B-36 pilot as he was visiting, got his story, use his oral history to help our visitors understand what it's like to actually fly the aircraft. And then we're also working with local universities so that their students can help us not only capture these, but they can use these in pretty much the new age of telling history, and they're calling it digital history. And it's capturing primary sources and then creating presentations. We see a lot more documentaries out there, and we have professors who are trying to teach young students to capture these primary histories and then record them, save them in a digital format so that they can present them in a whole new way. And not only are we doing crew members, but we want to get leaders, all service members, and civilians. Everyone that has gone through the Cold War, they all have special stories. I was just talking with some of our staff. I remember when I first started the museum, we had an oral history from a gentleman who was, I believe he was 9 years old when his father was held POW during the Vietnam War. And years later, he sat down and told us what it was like to be a child, to know that your father is now a POW, and what it was like to see him finally come home. And to take that and to be able to give that to the next generation to say, this is what it was like, you know, to have a parent be held as a POW. That's something that we can do, is talk with civilians who may have had a parent who was in the military, who flew bomber missions, who flew 135s on reconnaissance missions, and know that, you know, my dad's leaving on a mission and he's supposed to be back at this time, but we don't know. It's relaying that to other generations, because there are so many civilians out there who don't understand what it's like. One is to be in the military, but to have a parent or a spouse who's in the military and what they go through. And these oral histories are a way for us to help relay some of that information. Restoration. This is always a lot of people's favorite area. It is, I think they have one of the greatest jobs out there. They get to take aircraft and they get to make them new again. They get to bring them back to life so people can see what this aircraft was like, either when it rolled off the assembly line or maybe when it participated in a particular mission. The current project is the C-54. This is actually a dated photo. They're much, much farther along now. It is slated to be completed in October of this year. They're restoring it to the same condition it was when it first arrived at the museum. And when we get it out on display, we're going to expand our Berlin airlift story. I just interviewed a gentleman in Bennington, Nebraska, who flew C-54s in Berlin airlift, so we'll be able to include that. Our current display is about half of what we actually have for the Berlin airlift. And we'll utilize this aircraft to help tell that story, and then tell the story of the aircraft itself. The next project slated to go into restoration right now is the EC-135. We're having a kickoff, kind of a fundraiser for it in March, coming this year. And we're not actually having the kickoff. There's a group that are wanting the aircraft to be restored, so they're hosting the event at our museum. The 135 is projected, I believe, right now to be about a 5-year project. So we'll be doing other projects along the way. Those two projects are the B-47 and the B-36. B-36 restoration, my understanding, has started the day they moved into our new museum. And it was projected to be a 10-year project. As you can tell, we're running a little behind, but it is a big aircraft. It was our aircraft of the month, and what I was very happy to be able to show folks is the flight deck and engineering deck is complete. The comms deck, I believe, is 90% complete, and they're now working on the bomb nav nose section. And we do have some weekend guys who go back in the tail section and work back there. So it's constantly evolving. Obviously, the exterior is going to be the hardest part because they're going to have to do it in place. Any painting, any priming, all that's going to have to be done in place. Another thing is they just put out, Don, you may have to help me remember, I think it's the bomb sight off the nose. A gentleman in Chicago had some aircraft equipment and contacted us and said, if we come get it, we can have it. One of those was the bomb sight from the B-47, and I think the other one is for the 36. And the 47 has already been restored and put in a nice case, and it's set out by the B-47, and then the 36 one just went out. That's what we've done in restoration. And to give you a little background on restoration, we have one full-time person in restoration, Mark Hamilton, goes by Hambone, has a career of Air Force aircraft maintenance, and has done a variety of other jobs. He started with the museum, I believe, in 95, 96 time frame. He was there when they moved the museum from Offutt out to our new location. And so he knows every aircraft, I think I'd have to say intimately. He's been inside every single one, all through it. He's seen how we've taken everything apart, put it all back together, and unfortunately he's done it actually a few times. But he has a great team of volunteers. I believe right now he has, what he says, 30 active volunteers, and another 10 or 20 that are come and go, depending on their schedules and whether they're in town or not. They come out every now and then. They have a pretty good group that come in on Saturdays, and he has a Saturday manager that oversees them. And they work on specific projects, usually smaller projects that are done quicker because they're only there one day a week. But they're always looking for pretty much new life in that, new people. And he says you don't have to have any experience. They'll train you on anything you do. If anyone's interested in helping with restoration, please contact us. They always need more help. I need more help with the collection. We can always use more folks to give tours. All right, Aircraft of the Month. This was something that was started, I believe, in 2013. And we have something else that is called Second Saturday. And we started this back in, I think it was 2005, 2006 time frame. The original Second Saturday was myself, Mark Hamilton, and our Saturday restoration manager and a lot of our restoration volunteers. We would all go to the museum on the second Saturday of the month, invite members to come out, and I would talk to them about the history of the aircraft. Mark would talk to them how the aircraft was moved to our new location, and then we would take them on a tour of the aircraft. And if it's a smaller aircraft, we might just open it up and let you look inside. If it's a bigger aircraft, we'll get you inside of it if we can. And people get to see, usually it's a restored aircraft, but if it's not, or it's in process, they get to see that process. The Aircraft of the Month they started in 2013. It was just highlighting an aircraft for the month. And it was highlighted on our calendar, and they created some trading cards that you'll see at your tables for the B-36. They created things like this, and the incentive was for folks to collect all the cards, and then once you collect all 12 cards for that year, they do a drawing, and there's a special gift at the end of the year, I believe. What I've done is I've worked with our staff to connect these two. So the Aircraft of the Month and the Second Saturday aircraft are the same aircraft, but also now we create special displays for those. The B-36 has more background information on the aircraft. We also talk about the FICON project, where they took the RF-84 and kind of slotted it into the belly of the aircraft for reconnaissance reasons. And eventually, I think they were using actually as potential bombing missions. But then we're also capturing these oral histories, and we put these on a monitor so that, again, our visitors and our members can hear the personal stories of people who flew or worked and served on these aircraft. And then on the second Saturday, we also like to bring out a special speaker. For the B-36, Bill was our special speaker out there, did a fabulous job. All of our members really enjoyed it. And the event keeps growing. And it's a way for us to take these aircraft and really help people get in touch with it. People can research it, they can read about it in books, they can watch movies, they can watch videos. But when they meet people who flew the aircraft and they get a little bit more behind the scenes of the aircraft, they get a lot more appreciation for it. And that helps us out because it helps people become more engaged in our museum. But it also, I think, helps our public out because it gives them a greater appreciation for those who have served on those aircraft. Special events. We had our indoor air show last weekend, coinciding with the opening of our Tech City exhibit. This is the opportunity for RC pilots to come out and fly their aircraft inside our museum. And it gives the public a chance to talk with these folks and find kind of new and interesting hobbies that are out there. I know I took my kids out there, and that was the first thing my 8-year-old said is, well, can we get one of those? And it's, today, that's how a lot of folks are getting interested in flying. It inspires them, you know, they fly the RC around, and then they start thinking, well, what would it be like to fly a real airplane? The Swing Under the Wings is an event coming up in February, and they started this a few years ago. It's kind of a big band dance, and I think kind of a light dinner that they do actually out among the aircraft. They do special lighting, and it's a wonderful event, and it's always been planned right around Valentine's Day. So it's a nice event for everybody to take their sweetheart to. And then, as I said, the EC-135 kickoff, that's going to be in March. We're actually going to pull the C-54 out, and I think the T-29 out. We're going to bring the EC-135 in, let folks get a good up-close look at it in its kind of dirty state right now. It needs a lot of cleaning, a lot of tender loving care. So we're going to do that, and that's going to help a group do a kickoff to start raising the funds in order for us to start the restoration process on this. And then the B-1 out front. For those of you who've been out to the museum over the last 16, 17 years now, I have noticed that we don't have an airplane sitting out front. We used to have 2 big pilings sitting out there that were waiting for a B-52. A B-52 that, as far as I know, is still in service. So I learned that the plan was, we have the first B-52 ever assigned to SAC. And it's every time somebody comes to me and says, hey, you need to put that airplane out front, I say, that's the first one, the very first one. There were only one of those. There's only one first one. We have it. We don't want to just, well, people have tracked down what was the last B-52 ever assigned to SAC, and it is currently still on duty. And we're on the list that when it's retired, we want it. And the plan was to put it out front. Not sure when that's going to happen, but we do have the B-1. We have B-1A model, and when we got that aircraft, we looked long and hard at it to say, you know, how can we tell the story? Well, how can we utilize this aircraft? And we got it from the Air Force Museum. The entire interior has been gutted, so there's nothing in there. We can't really take people inside and show them that. But when we were researching the aircraft, we discovered that it had been painted 4 different camouflages. It was painted white at one time for the test patterns. It was painted in the desert. It was painted gray, and then it was painted in the strategic or the European woodland, and that's what we have it painted in now. And so we then came up with the idea of, well, since we can't take people inside this aircraft, and it's a very large aircraft, takes up a lot of room, why don't we put this out front? And it's been a dream, and it's been a project that's been on and off. And I'm happy to say that we've got our sticks knocked down, we've got pads poured for it out front, and we have received, I think, our final funding to actually take that aircraft and mount it out front. So we're pretty excited about that. It won't happen until probably mid-spring, mid to late spring, and a lot of it just has to do with timing of other events. But that'll be going out there, and so the museum's going to be growing and having a lot of new looks to it. But it's going to be looks kind of more back to the original museum. That takes us to our fundraising. How we raise our funds, we obviously get our admissions. When people buy things in the store, ride our simulators, attend special events, we can raise funds that way. But that only gets us part of the way there. Our other way is through memberships, and there's different levels of memberships that give people different levels of engagement with the museum. We also have our grants. We are currently applying not only for local grants, but we're now looking at federal grants. All of these are a bit of a challenge because we have to match the funds from someplace else, but allows us to take on larger projects. And then sponsorships. That's a great way for people to really get engaged, and there's all kinds of levels within that. Someone can come in and they can buy a brick for the memorial patio or a bench to go with an aircraft, all the way up to sponsoring an aircraft. And a lot of these come through not just on the corporate level, but also on the individual level. And then Gala. This is something that our executive director wants us to hold later this year. And the plan is to do it every other year. It's a way for us to not only thank the community for their support, but try to engage more of the community. That's our last slide. And I also know that, talking with some folks, I had some other questions that came out. One of course, was where do we get our volunteers? And we get our volunteers everywhere. We have veterans that volunteer with us, former pilots, former crew members, school teachers come out. We have intern volunteers that come from the high schools. I know Restoration just acquired a volunteer intern who's a junior in high school, and he really wants to work on aircraft when he gets out, and so he's trying to get a little knowledge that way. And how do we use our volunteers? Obviously with Restoration, I use them to help me manage the collection, but also help create exhibits, do research. We use them as tour guides to engage the public, the visitors that come in. Education department, we use them. They use them for their overnights. They use them for their programming. And we use them in our administrative offices, where they'll help with marketing, with development, anything that needs to be done with that. Another question that was posed was, how do we select pretty much what goes in the museum as far as the aircraft? I can tell you the history, when the museum started in 1959 with the B-36 landing, that goes back to Colonel, I always mispronounce it, I think it's Aaron, who worked at SAC headquarters. And he got this idea that as aircraft are being retired, it'd be a great idea to place these near the front gates of bases. It can welcome VIPs, welcome new airmen coming in, people transferring to the base, and it helps inspire them. And at that time, in 1959, the B-36 was being kind of phased out, and Colonel Aaron sent his suggestion up the chain, and General LeMay had heard about it and said he just loved the idea. And so the B-36 landed and started our museum. They parked it near the Bellevue gate to serve as a monument for SAC. And then more aircraft started to become available as they're being retired. The Air Force Museum started a program where they would loan aircraft out to bases for this purpose. And by 1966, the museum had over 20 aircraft in their collection. And the base in SAC figured out that they had so many people just in the community that wanted to come see these airplanes sitting at the end of a runway that they turned operation, or they were going to turn operation of this over to the state of Nebraska. And so when it was turned over to the state of Nebraska then wanted to acquire more aircraft. And a lot of it has to do with what has flown with SAC. That's always been our focus, what has flown with SAC, or what helps us tell that story. And so that helps us pick out not only the aircraft, but what artifacts to accept as part of our donation. And as far as the aircraft, we have a wish list with the Air Force Museum of what we would like. That is how we got our B-1. That's how we got our RF-4, though that took a different route. Our B-1, we had on our wish list that we want a B-1 because the B-1 was like the last big bomber for SAC, the Gulf War. Great way to wrap that story. Well, when the Air Force Museum got a new B-1 in, and one that had seen combat, of course they said, we're going to keep this one. You guys get to have this A model that's been here sitting outside. Which we said, you know, that's fine, we'll take that. And as we researched it, we discovered, well, this is the last B-1A model ever built. There are only 4 built. There's only 2 left in the world, and we have the last one. And ours was the one used to develop the new B-1B model. So we were very happy to get that. The RF-4 came a different route to us. A local group of National Guard in Lincoln there had always asked us, why don't you guys get like an RF-4? And we just posed to them, you find it for us, and they did. They found one. They found one that had flown with the Nebraska Air National Guard, sitting down at Davis-Monthan, and we were calculating, okay, here's what it's going to cost to get it out of there, to get it up here, to restore it. And as we worked with them, we just said, you know, that's just a little bit too much for what we're getting. Then they kept searching. We then got a phone call and said, hey, we found one. It's out in Ohio at the old Rickenbacker base. And as we find out, the Air Force Museum knew it was there. It's not being utilized. They said, yeah, you can have it. And we worked with Worldwide Aircraft over here, and they said, yeah, we can do it for this much. And it all came together, and we're able to acquire that aircraft that has that great connection. And then somebody was posing the question of where do we get all of our aircraft parts? Our restoration department has an incredible network out there. They work with other museums, they work with collectors, and what they can't find, they usually can fabricate. A great example is if you come in and look at our B-17. Our B-17 was originally a G model, so it had the chin turret, the tail turret, but ours had gone through many modifications when it was still in service, and so it didn't have those pieces. But our restoration department fabricated them. They couldn't find them. Now the ball turret on ours was missing, and they found one at the Combat Air Museum down in Kansas, and they've loaned that to us. It's kind of a permanent loan where they're not using it, they don't expect to use it, and we put that into our aircraft. So that's a way for us to get our parts, and fabrication is a big part of it. Our restoration guys have become experts in this. And then again, going back to, are we looking for new aircraft? We always are. A lot of it has to do with what the cost is to get it to us. I get calls several times a year from people who tell me they have airplanes that they want to give to us, that sometimes they don't pan out. We've been offered some small civilian aircraft, and sometimes those are, well, we want to give it to you, but we're not done with it yet. So we're waiting on those things. And we've had a couple groups approach us and say, well, you need some World War I aircraft, and we want to come build you one. Well, if you want to build it, you buy the materials, we'll give you the space, and they're working those things through. So we are always kind of looking for new aircraft, but a lot of it has to do with what can we afford to bring in. And then people have asked, where do we get our histories for the aircraft? And we start off, well, at least I start off with just going to the Air Force Museum. That's where the aircraft has come from. Have them give me everything they have. And then there's some other avenues for research. And then I take, where the aircraft was based at, who it was based with, and search those histories to find some more information. But probably the best is talking to the people who have flown them. When you find out that someone has flown your B-36, and you start talking to them, well, where did you fly it at? What was it like to fly it? Talking with other historians out there who have already done a lot of that research and getting the histories that way. Does anybody have any questions for me? Yes.
The boneyard down at Davis Mountain, is that a resource for you?
It can be. It can be. Depending on as far as parts, depending on what we need. Now, a lot of our aircraft are pretty old, and so they don't have any in the boneyard, but they are one contact for us. One of the challenges is we have to pay to not only have them pull it out and prepare it for shipping, and then pay for the shipping. So depending on what it is you want. Now, as far as aircraft, that's who we went to originally for an RF-4. And it was going to cost us just as much to have them prepare it for shipping and take it to their front gate as it was to have Worldwide bring it to us. So at that point we just said, and if I remember correctly, it costs less for us to actually have Worldwide go out to Ohio, pick up the one we have, and bring it back to us than it was just to go down to the front gate at the boneyard and bring one up. So it really worked out well for us. Yes.
Where'd you get the 105? I mean, yeah, the 105.
The 105 came from, I believe it's Castle Air Museum out in California. They had it sitting out there, and the Air Force Museum contacted us because Castle was really not utilizing the aircraft at all. It wasn't on display, it was just kind of sitting. And it was deteriorating pretty good, and Castle had just said, yeah, it's not a high priority for us. We have other things we have to do. And so the Air Force Museum approached them and says, well, if we find a new home for it, we want to move it there. And they said, go right ahead. We were contacted because it was one of many aircraft on our wish list. And this is when Denny Hahn was out there. And they contacted him and said, you know, you want this? And he said, absolutely. And so we worked with PMs worldwide. And it actually grew from there because when they got out there, they also had an MX missile, a little midget man missile that they weren't utilizing. And they just openly just said, if you guys want, take that too. And Worldwide said, you know, it's not going to cost you anymore because we got an empty truck coming back in. So we were able to acquire that. Yes.
A real quick question on the planes that you put out on display.
Yes.
How much extra cost or effort does it take to keep those things up?
That is budgeted into the restoration plan. It varies as far as cost. It varies per aircraft, but it goes into the whole plan where they have to seal up everything on it. If you remember, a lot of the aircraft when the museum was here, a lot of those were just taxied in and just dropped off. They would go out, purge the liquids out, and do any demail they had to do, but it just sat there, and all that plexi deteriorated. For aircraft that'll be going outside, we'll either do a frosted plexi that it won't yellow on us, or we can do a blackened plexi, depending on the aircraft and what we do. Right now our T-39 is sitting out there, and they're preparing, they sealed that aircraft completely up so we won't get any pest going inside, no leakage going inside of it, and they're preparing now to change out the plexi on it to protect that. And then there's periodic checks. I believe it's set for every 3 months for them to do a complete walkthrough or walk around of the aircraft, checking for any leakage, anything like this. Though I know that Mark goes out there easily every month, just checking everything on it. Anything that's still in storage in the back.
When you restore the EC, do you plan to put the wings and the engines back on it?
There's a proposal written right now that has the aircraft being restored and placed inside on display without the wings or engines. The engines would easily be able to be restored and mounted on stands to be with it. There is I guess a plan B, you would say, that if that one isn't going to happen, that we would restore it and put the wings on, but we'd have to display it outside, because we just would not have the interior space to do that. Yes?
Comment and a question on the C-54 you're working on. Used to be assigned to the 100 Strat wing down at Tucson, and the ground recovery officers in my squadron used to fly that.
Oh, really?
Did their flying time.
Oh,
it was
okay.
courier aircraft. So
yeah.
Secondly, one airplane that nobody knows about assigned to SAC is the DC-130. That would be on the wish list.
It is. It is on our wish list.
Warms my heart.
It's one of the things that our executive director, Dr. Lou Dennis, has talked about. And this has been a conversation that goes back many years, is developing an air park outside. The reason for that is our aircraft, the SAC aircraft, had big aircraft. And we would love to be able to expand to house everything inside, but in reality, doing an air park and putting some of the bigger airplanes outside right now will help us get those out on display so people can freely go see them. And then we can develop and grow from there and possibly bring it back inside. One of the aircraft that falls into that is the only aircraft the museum actually owns, and that's the Avro Vulcan that was given to the museum by the RAF. And it sat inside for from 98 to, I believe it was 2012. 2012 when the B-29 was completed, the B-29 took its place inside the museum, so the Vulcan went back outside. And the plan right now is to completely seal that aircraft up, temporarily only, but eventually we'll do a complete restoration, and that'll end up out in the air park, just so the visitors can experience and enjoy it. Had a question over here?
A couple. You had a C-133 at the outside of Dauphin.
Yep.
And do you remember any details on when or how that was acquired? I know you gave it to Dover.
Yes, yeah.
And the reason for that.
As far as acquiring it, I would have to go back and look at the file, because that one goes way back also.
Real old people.
And the 124 is also in theirs, where these were aircraft that were acquired when the museum was here at Offutt. And I believe it was after the state had taken over. As far as their disposition, we were approached, again, by the Air Force Museum, and part of the agreement to receive the B-1A model was to relinquish the 133 and the 124 to Dover. And since they had not made the move out to our new location yet, and a lot of that had to do with pure size, we were never going to be able to display them indoors. So they stayed at Offutt. The decision was made to go ahead and relinquish those two and then acquire a B-1. And so we relinquished those, and I think it was probably another 4 years before the B-1 was available for us.
The other question was, do you have any use or need or want for someone who might have a tech order -1 checklist for airplanes?
Yes, it's if you have any of the manuals, tech orders, anything that go along with one of our aircraft, we can always
send my C-133 to Dover, though, huh?
Yeah, well, it's I have to look, because I think we actually still have some of those manuals. When they asked for the aircraft, I'm trying to think, is when they first asked for the aircraft, I was the interim curator at the time. The curator that was there had left, and they were looking for a new curator. And since I was the interim, I got the phone call, and I was very new to the museum, and I was kind of like that squeaky voice kid. I got to go ask my dad. I don't know. And I went to our deputy director and asked him. He goes, yeah. He goes, I've been working on that. Okay. And so when we talked about it, and for me it was all paperwork, because I didn't have to come down and check the aircraft out. Worldwide was going to handle the move. I never thought about asking them, you guys want the manuals? And they never called back to ask them, so I just said, you know what, we'll keep those.
They probably have more than they can handle.
I think they probably do. I've talked with a 124 guy who he'd been out to Dover, and he saw ours out there, and he stopped by our museum, and I spoke with him briefly, and I asked him, and I said, you know what resources do they have? He goes, they got everything they need for their aircraft. Yes?
Does the state support, and actually just ballpark for me, what's the split there in terms of your cost to run your operation at the clinic?
We do not get any direct state funding. We don't get any direct federal funding. We support our museum entirely through our own fundraising, through our admissions. We do apply for state grants, but those are open to all nonprofits. And like I said, we're now starting to apply for federal grants, but again, those are just open grants for everyone. There are other museums that have this opportunity. The Smithsonian actually has a line item within the national budget that covers their operational cost, but that does not cover new exhibits, new projects, anything like that. And then there are some museums out there that they are heavily sponsored by a corporation who works it into their fiscal budget every year. And I'm trying to think, there is a museum out there I talked to a few years ago. They were able to convince their state to, in the form of a grant, give them an annual contribution. They just have to do the paperwork with that. It was based off of sales tax, and it was a lump sum that they got every year. But no, ours is all through grants and admissions, and we're not in talking to people. We're helping people to help us support us.
Couldn't help but notice we were out there in the fall.
I'll say it's cantankerous. Since I've been there, we have had leaks, and it's basically in the atrium area. And the one thing I've noticed over 16 years is it never drips in the same place twice. So and we've had some work done on it, and it seems to fix it, but then the water, when it rains, it just seems to creep in. And so it is a challenge. Our executive director is, I know he's talking with, I think there's 3 different board members he's talking with right now of just trying to get to the bottom of it. You know, what is the final solution on it, on getting that fixed. But it's been an ongoing. Other questions?
I see the card on our table. Where do we stand on potential of renaming?
To walk them around the museum and give them my background knowledge. And I was told I have to tell the truth. So, but as I walked them through it, one of the questions that came up was, you know, have you ever thought about changing the name back? And my answer then and now is, I'm not opposed to changing the name back to the Sac Museum, but let's do all of the research to make sure we are doing it and doing it right. And these cards that you'll see, that's one way we're doing it. We're asking people, and we're asking people who are going to have a vested interest. We're asking the communities. We've already talked with our board, and we want to hear from everybody. What are your feelings on this? Do you think it should be back to the Sac Museum? Is there another name you prefer? Do you prefer not to change it? I haven't seen, I don't see those results. We've just started this process. All of these are going to our marketing department, and they're tallying things and they're keeping track of this. I don't know. I heard when we originally changed the name, I heard from a lot of folks on their feelings on it. And talking with some folks, I've been hearing different views. I'm actually very, very eager to find out what people think of it. Should we change it back? Should we not change it back? Is there a different name that better suits our museum?
Another question along the same lines. We were given this cockamamie story back then that they had to change the name in order to get assets for display from various other museums. By keeping it the Strategic Air Command Museum, we were prohibited legally from getting like space displays and things like that. My question to you, is that the truth?
I was never told that I could not borrow items because of our name. I can say that before we looked at changing the name, we were never really trying. I was never directed to borrow space artifacts.
The gentleman that briefed us, the first director, I guess?
Hazelrig.
Hazelrig.
Yeah.
He stated that before, he spoke to us, right, Dick, the Daedalians and the Society of Strategic Air Command.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, just like you are saying, they had to do this if they had any hope of getting displays, aircraft displays or other things on loan from outside any Strategic Air Command linkage.
That, like I said, I started as a curator in 2000.
That was after the fact, okay.
Well, the name change happened in 2001. I believe it was in summer of 2001. Someone can correct me if I'm mistaken. In 2000, the exhibits I did were all SAC related and based out of our collection. I did borrow, we borrowed a Star Wars exhibit from a museum. It wasn't a Smithsonian or a NASA thing. This was, somebody built this thing, and so it had no connection there.
Appreciate your time. That's good. That answered my question.
Okay. Other questions? All right, I agree.